Hey there everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to go over the tried and true macro lens. This is the Sigma 105 2.8 EX lens, and this is one of the first lenses I bought whenever I moved to digital photography. I originally got this on my D3400, I've used this on the D500, and now on the Nikon Z7 II. Honestly, this is a very usable lens in many different situations. I have to say though that macro is probably one of my first loves in photography. It really got me in touch with nature, because in the springtime that we're in right now, that you really start noticing the little odds and ends coming up through the ground foliage. I've had this lens for about 6 years now. If you have this on a crop body, there is a second lens hood that you screw into this that goes onto your macro lens here. Now honestly, I never used that lens hood extender on this. I just always used the regular 35mm full frame lens hood on it, because I just thought it looked kind of silly, and I just use lens hoods to protect the front element from like banging into stuff. And I'm not really too worried about lens flare whenever you're doing macro photography. Maybe if you're in a studio you'll be more worried about it, but honestly I think it's kind of a silly thing to put on there. Now there's really not a whole lot to talk about this, to be honest. I'll let the photo examples talk for themselves. In the video examples, it does focus to macro 1:1, not one of those fake lenses that claims to be a macro lens but isn't. This is a true 1:1 macro lens. Now one thing you have to remember is this is a 1:1 lens, but whenever you're focusing to a closest ability, you're not going to be able to shoot at 2.8. It's probably going to be around 5.6 or so. So whenever you're focusing to something super close, it moves the elements back so it can focus that close, and you lose your aperture. It ends up being about 5.6. That is your realized aperture and not your actual aperture. And it does take a 62mm thread filter, 62mm lens cap as well. Now as you can tell, I have lost the original lens cap a couple times, so I got one of these on there. Got it off Amazon for like $4, $5. I don't even remember the brand name, to be honest. So we'll start with the focus window here. Nothing too fancy. Honestly, I don't really have much of a use for that. It just shows you racking focus. I don't really understand the purpose of that. Never had a use for it myself. So the first switch we're going to go to is your focus limiter switch. You have your full focus. This is the full range of the lens. Put in the middle, you have 0.45 meters to infinite. I would probably use that for really anything that's not macro you want to use. That way the lens doesn't rack all the way forward and back as much. And then you have your macro range on here, 0.312 to 0.45 meters. Now I'll put a little infographic in the video here. This is from Sigma's website. This gives you the basic specs of the lens. Now when you're talking about minimum focus distance, this thing goes to about 12.5 inches. So you have to think about it from the front of your sensor out 12.5 inches. Then the second switch we have here is your autofocus and manual. Not a whole lot to that. If you're doing macro photography, you're probably going to be on manual. And then your last switch is your optical stabilization, your OS, or in Nikon's terminology, the VR. So here's off, 1 and 2. So off is usually if you're on a tripod. 1 is just your standard VR vibration reduction settings, and then 2 is if you're panning to take pictures, something like not that you would with this lens, but like a bird in flight or aviation. You only want to pan in one direction. That's why you would put it on the number 2 setting. And another thing about the optical stabilization on this lens, it's very loud. You will hear it in there humming, and with it off and not attached to a camera, you will definitely hear the elements in there kind of flopping around. It's a very normal thing to hear, so if you ever buy this and you hear that, completely normal. Don't freak out thinking your lens is broken. Now if we look at the back of the lens here, there is no rubber gasket, so this lens is not weather sealed. Now the lens hood is reversible. Fits nice in there, nice solid click. Doesn't really fall off. Protects the lens very nicely too, because it does take up about half the actual lens barrel when it's reversed. The only negative of this is, say you are in a hurry to put this on your camera, take a picture of something, and your autofocus fails and you're trying to manually focus. Well, it covers the manual focus ring when you have the lens hood reversed. So then just have to remember to take it off, reverse it, then you have access to your ring. One of my biggest pet peeves out there is we'll have lenses that say macro on them, but they're not actual one-to-one macro lenses. They don't recreate your subject to full size, life size on the sensor at your closest focus. And then we have people that don't understand that, and then they think they got a macro lens, but they're really just getting ripped off by whoever made the lens, fooling them into thinking that it's a true macro lens. So without further ado, let's jump into some photo and video examples using this lens. So we're going to start out with some flowers, and some of these were taken at the Pittsburgh Botanical Garden, highly recommend that, and also Raccoon Creek State Park. So first we're going to say that the macro lens really works the best about f8 to about f12, sometimes f14. Anything more than that, you get diffraction, and it really starts to cut down on your image quality and give you a lot of softness. So the first photo we're going to look at is this blue flower from Phipps. I don't really know what that was, but that was at f8 on the D3400. And what I really like about this lens is you can put on pretty much any camera body and it can turn out some really nice results. You don't need a high-end, high megapixel camera to make the most out of it. The second image is a bluette. It's about half the size of your pinky nail, and the little hole in the middle is like a size of a sewing needle. So you can get in there real good, get some nice details. This is at f10. We have this really, really nice pink rose after some rain. It was in our neighbor's garden. I just really appreciated and liked how the rain kind of beat it off the petals. I thought it was a beautiful image. This fern was at the Raccoon State Park Wildflower Reserve. I just thought it was neat how it had all the little hairs and stuff coming off of it as it tried opening in the springtime. Pink flower is called Dutchman's Breeches, Dutchman's Breeches, depending on how you want to pronounce it, I suppose. It pretty much looks like pantaloons on someone's drying rack outside. That's why they named it that. And most of them are white, but I found a pink one, so that was kind of cool. This purple one, I'm not really sure what it was. It was in my wife's garden. I just really liked how you can see the crystals of the pollen and stuff on the ends of the flower, and it really nicely blurred out the background, even at f8. This is a focus stacked image inside a light box in my studio. This is actually a silver maple leaf bud where the little leaves are coming out, the green bits. This is early spring. Everyone thinks this is a bud off of marijuana plant, but it's definitely not. This little 2-photo segment here, this is for wildlife. This was at the Pittsburgh Aviary, and you can just tell how sharp it is by how nice and crisp it is around the eye, the details on this yellow bird. Then we have a penguin through glass as it was swimming by, and I really picked out the details of his eye and the nictitating membrane that goes over the eye. I thought that was really cool. You can see the skin or the scales around the eye too. These next two are just random items I was taking pictures of, trying out the macro lens when I first got it 5 years ago. As you can see, this is a computer monitor, and you can see the individual pixels being lit up or turned off to show the logo. The next little example we have, I thought this was actually just a fun thing I tried, was I put the D500 on a tripod. The black is actually the bed cover for my bed of the truck. And you pretty much just spray and pray the lens at f3.2, hoping to get a water drop in focus at the right plane of focus. The next little segment we got here, this is a little bit more action oriented. Since I didn't have a 2.8 lens for those rodeos, I took my macro lens and used it as a sports lens. Now, it has a pretty slow autofocus. It's not going to track anything super fast, but it worked pretty good for rodeo at a distance. And as the sun was setting, there was no way I was going to use my Sigma 150 to 600 on this. As you can see, we're at f2.8 at this guy on the back of this horse, 1/1600th of a second, and ISO 2800. Now there is a little bit of crop, and this is on a crop body, so you get a little more distance of it, so it's about equal to about 152 millimeters. This was an indoor shoot, also at the Sundance Arena, and we really had to fight with the different lighting going on here too, but it turned out pretty good. I was actually quite impressed with it. I was trying to bump up the aperture a little bit more, that way we can get more depth of field out of the lens, but it wasn't too bad. I just thought this was a really cool shot with the bull floating in midair as it jumped. It was around Halloween, so all the bull riders had their Halloween costumes on. This is the main thing people are going to buy the macro lens for, probably, is insects in nature. So for this, we got f10 here, and you really need to crank up your shutter speed to accommodate for like the wind blowing the leaves around, the insects around, and you moving around. This was a bumblebee on our milkweed plants out back in our garden. This is one of my favorite macros because you got the front two legs and its face all in focus along with its eye. Another bee shot here. Not sure what that flower is, but another one of my favorite bee shots on the macro. This is a really nice colorful picture. It shows off the color rendering of the lens, I think, in my opinion. Nice little honeybee getting a drink, sharing some pollen on our purple irises. Some kind of fly on our Montauk daisy out front. Really locked onto the eye on this one. Nice and crisp on there. And again, this is on a $250-ish used D3400 camera. You don't really need a high-end camera to make this lens sing. Not sure what this little dude is, but he was pretty cool. He just was sitting there rubbing his legs together. Every gardener's worst nightmare, all of the Japanese beetles. But this carapace looked really cool with the setting sun shining on it with the macro lens and all the little hairs showing up and whatnot. So this lens also works on some film cameras. This is on the Nikon F100. This is Ektar 100 film. This is a flowering dogwood in the spring. We have a trout lily. And then we have our neighbor's tulip poplar. I really like how it turned out. Then this last one's just a closer up image of it, showing the nice rendering of the bokeh in the background on the film camera using the Nikon F100 in the macro 105. The 105 does work with the VR in conjunction with the Nikon F100. If you really like product photography, the macro works good for that, but most people just use it like a 70 to 200 for that. But I use my macro so that I can take good pictures of things I post on eBay, and any defects or problems in products are clearly seen for the buyer. Another thing you can do with this is macro video. Now this clips of the monarch butterfly caterpillar here. This was all shot on the D500. So we'll just let this play through and you can just see the pretty decent quality you get out of it. Now if you have a higher end video camera or a video oriented hybrid camera, you'll get a little bit better quality out of this. But I was pretty happy with it for being a couple of years ago. And last but not least, you can use this lens for portrait photography. I just did this to show the rendering of the background in a portrait situation. I don't really do portraits myself, so I thought just put this in there, and you can also hear the autofocus motors running. So if you're using this for any kind of video, you definitely need to use a secondary source for your audio. So as we've seen in the examples, this lens is a very utility lens. You can use it for multiple things. It doesn't have to be macro. You can use it for portraits. You can use it for action. You can use it as a stand-in telephoto lens if you need a 2.8. Honestly, this is probably the #1 lens I'd recommend anybody that's on Canon or Nikon that doesn't want to pay the name brand fees for their macro lenses. So if this video is at all helpful or useful for you, please hit that subscribe button down below. Like the video, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you have had this lens before, what your experiences are with it, how you felt it performed. And if you're looking to buy this lens, I will have an Amazon affiliate link down below in the description. That really helps me out. It gives me a couple dollars for any purchases made with the Amazon affiliate links. And if you do get it, let me know how it works for you. Until then, happy shooting. I'll see you out there.